Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News on the South Florida Conservative News site. It's Monday, September 1st, 11 a.m. Happy Labor Day to all of you legal laborers in the United States, especially you fellows out the union, keeping it real. And we are going to discuss the single most important intelligence debacle of our country's history. Yes, it is that big, it is that bad, and you aren't hearing much about it because of the magnitude of it. And we're discussing now the Chinese cloud and what is going on that we're aware of. Obviously, you're dealing with major intelligence forces. The only people who get the total story on that are the Chinese or whoever's paying off the head of that department that day so that they can then leak it to damage the president. But we'll try to get you through just part of this and then you can move forward because we can only do so much research. That's the important thing, right? Get some research out there for you to dig into on your own instead of just mindlessly saying shit over and over like some people do. Obviously, not you guys, because you're smart, you're here. So, what we're going to talk about here, as I said, once again, greatest intelligence failure in modern history, the China cloud. All right. Begins with the revelation. You saw it on Pete Hegseth's short video, which was then buried on the internet by a little bit older videos about 8 months ago, so that people had a hard time finding the very newest one. And it begins with a revelation, and that is that Chinese nationals were servicing Pentagon cloud systems through Microsoft's so-called digital escort program. I tried to enunciate so you can go and look it up on your own. It's important to look up your own information too. So that's right. So for nearly a decade, the Department of Defense outsourced critical cloud support functions to global engineering teams, including people working inside the People's Republic of China, which means they are the communists inside of China. That's how it works. The result, the very real possibility that vast swaths of US intelligence data have been exposed, copied, and cataloged by the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army and Navy. And you say to yourself, well, that's kind of crazy. How would that have ever happened? Well, if you recall, going back to the time of Bill Clinton and Al Gore, when Al Gore was taking bribes at the Buddhist temple in California from known agents of communist China, shit's gotten a little bit real over there in the Democrat Party. The Chinese have managed to infiltrate, I'd say, about two-thirds of the elected officials, plus their handlers. The Republicans were unfortunately not able to be infiltrated as badly because they were busy being servants of various local interest industries. So, you've got a little bit of a thing there. They weren't being patriotic. They were just eating out of a different trowel, right? So the damage to this is not just technical, it's a strategic, generational, and potentially irreversible damage that's been done to American intelligence and national defense. Always remember, national defense and intelligence should be a little bit different, but who the hell knows, right? So, how did we get here? We can talk about the dropped items along the way, the decisions and blind spots that created this disaster. Number one, the push for a commercial cloud. In the name of modernization and cost savings, two things you don't hear about the Pentagon. The Pentagon moved away from sovereign autonomous storage systems. Contracts like JEDI and JWCC, once again, JEDI and JWCC, placed Microsoft and its commercial cloud at the very heart of the defense intelligence ecosystem. Number two, the digital escort model. To maintain these systems, Microsoft leaned on a global workforce. The idea was that US-based staff would supervise Chinese-based engineers executing commands. In practice, the escorts often lacked the technical skills to actually control the process. The result was a backdoor vector for adversarial access, meaning that the communist Chinese had an open backdoor to get in and look at everything that was in the cloud. Number three, the warnings have been ignored. Starting in 2019, Red flags were popping up, warnings about the risks of potential foreign nationals in the Pentagon's cloud support. They were downplayed, they were ignored, they were brushed aside. And why was that? Because cost efficiency, once again, we're going to get crazy here. Cost efficiency and continuity of service won over against national security. When did we ever get cost effective and worry about continuity of service in the Pentagon? Which should be why you see generals and admirals getting fired now. There was something in the woodpile, and now we have to try to ferret it out. And number four, the exposure becomes public. And that wasn't until mid 2025 that investigative journalists and congressional pressure forced the truth into the daylight. But by then, like I said, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had to slam the brakes on Chinese servicing. But, by that point, the horse is already out of the barn. You're talking years, right? Of just being able to mindlessly go through our records and copy them or go in and search through them as you need to. And you say to yourself, this is insane. The Pentagon will spend $100,000 on a wrench. Why wouldn't it have its own storage system? And that's the part that stings the most. It wasn't just a mistake. It was almost structurally inevitable. You have to look at things at the Pentagon as well as you can. It's a very opaque place, but there are certain ways to get in, certain people to talk to, certain sites that discuss this all the time. The U.S. could have built a fully sovereign, autonomous storage system. Instead, it embraced the commercial cloud. Okay. You say, why would it use a commercial product to do this? And I can give you 5 reasons that were taken directly, probably from the internet, from other people that have dealt with this system. There are a lot of fellows that try to contract with the government for computer things. You see how Doge has pointed out that the American government's computer systems are 1,000 years behind schedule. It's hard to find guys that can give you new updated versions for things that are in Lotus, or something like that. It don't exist. It's like trying to get shit done in Latin and ancient Greek. So here's what you have. You had the cost argument, which was a joke, first of all, knowing the government's defense budget, right? Building a hardened sovereign data center, which is EMP shielding, the electromagnetic pulse that the Chinese always talk about, redundant and staffed by the U.S. would have cost tens of billions up front because there had been no buildup to it. This is what's been going on in the United States government, as you saw with the issue of the budget. The budget, we have never had a real budget in 15 years or whatever it was. It was just the same thing with cost of living attached to it. The military does the majority of their work the same way, which is criminal. So back when everybody else was starting to build these things or set money aside, as we would say, the Christmas club at the bank, the military wasn't doing it. It was buying those $10,000 wrenches that we talked about. Okay. So it's going to say, so that at a time when they do want it, they say, well, it would cost tens of billions of dollars. So politically, that was a non-starter. Cloud outsourcing, as you remember, when that started, made IT look cheap and lean, and also made these generals that don't use anything but a rotary phone look like they were Buck fucking Rogers. That is a double joke there. Second, the speed and innovation argument, okay? Contractors promise faster tools. Now AI has been thrown in the mix. Now big data, machine learning, Pentagon leaders bought the Silicon Valley pitch hook, line, and sinker because it will save their jobs at Pentagon. It will screw guys that are in the field, but it will save the Pentagon guys their jobs. Commercial equals advanced equals promotion. Number 3, the workforce gap. The Pentagon lacked cleared engineers at scale because the United States has not put any kind of real emphasis on trying to get engineers through schools anymore. We don't do that. We would rather have gender studies people. It is all part of the problem that you have with the American learning system, which is why when Trump was yelled out about the 600,000 Chinese students, there was a couple of reasons. I think he thought maybe he could turn some of them around. It was never going to be 600,000, but that doesn't matter. The fact is we have to go abroad to do some of this unless we do what the Japanese do and make things less manpower dependent and more computer dependent. We could do it, but you know, you have to want to do it. So anyway, the Pentagon lacked clear engineers at scale. Microsoft and Amazon had armies of them. So the job was outsourced. Unfortunately, the armies were of the Emperor of China, right? So that was one of the things that they should have mentioned. Fourth is what we would call contractor capture. Procurement culture defaults to buy from the primes. Microsoft positions itself to be indispensable. Honestly, they should never buy another Microsoft product. I have certain doubts as to why Microsoft did what it did, considering that its owner is a maniac who wants us all eating bugs and is very, very chummy, as my grandmother would say, with the King of China. Okay. So Microsoft puts itself in a position where it says it's indispensable, and the Pentagon believed them. And then fifth, political optics. After failed IT projects, leadership wanted to win. Okay, the cloud deal looked modern, efficient, and forward thinking. We're going to keep using these words because this is what they used when they went out with their press releases. No one wanted to argue for a digital Cheyenne Mountain. And if you know what that is, that's where they keep all the paperwork for when everybody retires. And it's all down in some freaking chicken wire room or something like that. So sovereignty was outsourced to a private corporation with known ties to a foreign enemy, and by extension to the foreign enemy's workforce. So that's what that's really all about. A little upset here. So why is this historic? Okay. Why does this rank as the historic scale failure of the United States? Because once the system is considered breached, and this is how I was taught. I don't know what they teach them at spy school or what they teach them in the United States spy school, but once the system is considered breached, all data must be treated as compromised. Everything in there has to be considered as blown, as we would say. If there were links to people, those links are blown. Cut those people loose. We aren't talking to them anymore. Okay? That means targeting priorities, analysis, maybe even source identities. Okay? It's not just a leak of secrets, it's strategic blindness. What if in that documentation, because they aren't going to tell you, what if in that documentation it gave us the 10 favorite places that we like to park submarines that are capable of intercontinental ballistic missile launches? Now the Chinese know if they were to go to war, they could drop depth charges all over 10 spots and possibly kill the unkillable submarine, and it would never even know it happened, right? If it has 10 spots that it normally hangs in, bomb the shit out of them. Depth charges, whatever. Good chance you're going to catch them. The United States lost its ballistic missile system, undersea ballistic missile system. We would be lost. Okay? Lost. More than the carriers, more than anything. And now China knows what the US knows. And more dangerously, what the US doesn't know. And that changes military planning. That changes diplomacy. Okay. Or even worse, what if they've gone in and changed things? You don't know. Nobody knows because they were in charge of taking care of things. It was fire and forget, throw it into the file cabinet. Somebody looted through the file cabinet. You don't remember, right? And that's what I mean. That changes diplomacy. That changes international security. This is America's enigma moment. For those of you who aren't familiar with the code breaking and the code machine from World War II, the German enigma, go to www.southfloridaconservative.com. I have a section in there on enigma and what it did, and also a section on what we can try to look at in current events to see what could have already been done and what can be forecast as happening in the future based on enigma realities in World War II can be extrapolated and used in this situation in modern time, exclusively not due to the machine itself, but to the fact that that level of intelligence is now available. They cracked our code theoretically just by having access to all of our shit. It's the same as when the British cracked the German code. Okay. So that's all we're needing for that. But for those of you history buffs, Enigma. Okay, so just as Germany lost its World War II advantages when Britain cracked the Enigma, the US now risks operating under the illusion that not everything was taken, when the reality is that everything must be assumed to be blown. All of our signal intelligence, all of our codes, all of our this, all of our that, all of our potential troop movements in case of attack, what we were going to do to defend the Taiwanese, all that shit is considered now to be blown. And if it is not considered to be blown, then you have to ask yourself, why would that guy do that? Well, first of all, we don't know what all's there. I would assume, knowing it's the Pentagon, it's almost everything, right? Because they had nowhere else to store anything. So by now, if you're like me, you're like, somebody needs to get shot in the head. Somebody needs to be thrown off a building, whatever. So who's going to get punished on this? And this is the easiest part. Microsoft is directly responsible for bringing Chinese nationals into the chain. Okay. DoD officials who approved and defended outsourcing our sovereignty. We know who they are. We do. Congress, which failed to ask tough questions. That had to go through Congress, I'm pretty sure, to get an okay. We know who they are. So let's be honest. The likely outcome is limited. Hearings, maybe fines, maybe reshuffling. Microsoft is too entrenched to lose its contracts. True accountability is unlikely in this situation. It is going to dog the Trump administration if they can't bring these guys to justice, even though came about during the Democrats. We are not seeing enough people going to jail for crimes against the people of the United States through the Trump's the Attorney General's office. It's a sad state of affairs. And it's causing people to lose their faith in Santa Claus. All right. They knew under the Democrats no one was ever going to go to jail unless you were a political enemy of Joe Biden. This situation, these people are political enemies of the United States. And they are not being brought in for whatever, interrogation. They are not being drug out in the middle of the night somewhere and beaten with sticks. Nothing is going on. We'll fire some more generals and admirals. Usually the biggest assholes will go. They will be given to us by the guys who are actually guilty, and they will still retire with their ranking intact. So what is going to be next? Like I said, anyone who has been involved in this or has read a spy book or anything like that will know we must assume that everything is blown. All your signals and stuff like that. Don't have any illusions. Every piece of data touched by that cloud must be treated as compromised and in the knowledge of the opposition. So you have to re-sovereignize, if we can use that word, re-sovereignize the defense storage. Ultra-sensitive, top-secret data in U.S.-owned, offline-capable bunkers. Secret-level operations in hardened hybrids, U.S. personnel only, and the unclassified, low-risk workloads in commercial clouds. Third, mandate U.S.-only servicing. Codify it in law with penalties for violations. And none of that bullshit where the Chinese company owns a subsidiary in the United States that services it and everybody happens to be an officer in the People's Liberation Army. None of that shit. Actual vetting of the people, vetting of the company. Fourth, we have to reconstitute sources and methods. You have to shut down compromised channels. You're going to have to rotate the keys, as we say. You're going to have to build new pathways. You have to come up with new codes. You're going to have to come up with new protocols. You just don't move the submarine 3 inches to the left. Okay? The whole thing, take it as a possible chance to revitalize the U.S. defense system, especially those that are going to be involved in combating China. And number 5, you have to change the Pentagon culture short of tearing the building down. Modernization can never again outweigh sovereignty. Granted, they are going to use that as an excuse to ask for zillions of dollars. That is going to have to get under control. We have to really look at every dollar the military spends, because they don't spend it correctly. All right. And I can say that as a person who can read an accounting sheet. All right. The China cloud isn't just a technical lapse, it is a strategic intelligence catastrophe. And it has been going on for decades of misplaced priorities. We are choosing cost savings and optics, which is bullshit. That's a bullshit excuse. That's what they're going to say over sovereignty and security. It was the excuse to put that information in the hands of the Chinese. There's no other reason for it to have been done. Somebody or some people saw this as an opportune moment to push the playbook into the hands of the other team. And if the U.S. doesn't act, this will be remembered as our Enigma moment, the moment that adversary read our playbook while we pretended the system was safe. The lesson is painfully simple. Never outsource your sovereignty. And if you have any other questions about this or any whatevers, feel free. You know, we're on BitChute, we're on Rumble, we're starting out on YouTube. We have our own site, southfloridaconservative.com. We're on Substack. We're all over the effing place. You can find us somewhere, and you know, we're out there. We want to be more interactive. If you have questions along these lines, we can do sub stories as well. We just want you to get more educated and look at more opportunities for education or information than just listening to somebody who just does a podcast and you say, oh yeah, that must be right. Let's go do that. We're the tip of the spear on this thing. We're the thin edge of the wedge, if you wish. All right. So that's all I have for you for now. Have a good Labor Day. And if you see somebody out there working, thank them. No gracias, though. See you later.